Hey there, Genesis International College students. Welcome back to The Explainer. We're getting right into topic 4 today because we are breaking down a subject that is absolutely fundamental to your future careers. We're looking at the critical, literally life-saving steps you need to take after a restricted height scaffold, that's a scaffold up to 4 meters, is fully built. So grab your notes, get comfortable, and let's master the art of post-build scaffold safety. So let's dive right into this. It's a really common misconception on job sites, especially for folks just starting out. You look at a scaffold, the last tube is secured, tools are put down, and it looks rock solid, right? You're probably thinking, great, the build is done, let's jump on and get to work. But actually, scratch that. I need to challenge that assumption right now. A finished build absolutely does not equal a safe build. Not until it's been rigorously inspected and formally certified. Until then, it's really just a collection of metal and timber. To bridge that gap between built and safe, here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover why scaffold safety never sleeps, the inspection timeline, essential scaffold checkpoints, safe alterations and repairs, and finally, mandatory documentation and handover. Let's get to it. Section 1, Scaffold Safety Never Sleeps. Look, it's pretty easy to look at a restricted height scaffold, something under 4 meters, and think it's no big deal compared to some massive high-rise setup. But let me be perfectly clear. Scaffolds under 4 meters still carry severe fall risks that demand your absolute respect. A fall from 3 or 4 meters can easily be catastrophic. The laws of physics don't take a break just because you aren't up in the clouds. So let's ground ourselves in Safe Work Australia's basic definition. A scaffold is a temporary structure erected to support access or working platforms when work can't be done at ground level. I really want you to focus on the word support. This structure is physically supporting you, your mates, and heavy materials up in the air. Because human lives rely on its stability, sticking to strict safety standards is just non-negotiable. And because we are dealing with actual lives here, the industry doesn't leave safety up to guesswork. Scaffolding is inherently high-risk work, so it's governed by a strict legislative framework. We're talking about the Model Codes of Practice under the WHS Act. These frameworks provide the practical, legally backed guidance you need to ensure that everyone who interacts with that scaffold goes home safe at the end of the day. It's basically your ultimate rulebook. Moving right along to Section 2, the inspection timeline. Now that we understand the why, we need to talk about exactly when you are legally required to inspect these structures. Timing is literally everything. Here is your highly testable 3-step timeline. You'll definitely want to memorize this. Number 1. Inspect it immediately after erection, but absolutely before its first use. Number 2, re-inspect after any incident, repair, or alteration whatsoever. And number 3, even if the scaffold hasn't been touched, it must be inspected at least every 30 days. This brilliantly shows that scaffold inspections are an ongoing life cycle, not just a one-and-done event. All right, Section 3, essential scaffold checkpoints. We got the timeline down, so let's mentally step onto the site and look at the physical components that are going to keep you alive. Now, what's really interesting here is looking at the incredible amount of trust a worker places in the structure beneath them. They're entirely focused on their work, totally relying on a secure platform. Our physical checks aren't just a bunch of box-ticking exercises, guys. They are the invisible safety net that ensures stability so everyone can actually do their jobs with total peace of mind. When you're inspecting that net, here's your essential checklist. You're checking the footings, making sure you have level sole plates on firmly compacted ground. Connections. Every single wedge needs to be driven home and cluster connectors secure. For planking, there can be absolutely no gaps, and they've got to be secured against wind uplift. You need correct mid-rails and top rails on all open sides. And finally, toe boards. They must be a minimum of 150 millimeters high and clipped securely. Why exactly 150 mil? Because that's the exact height that stops a stray hammer from rolling off the edge and clocking a colleague working below. Section 4, Safe Alterations and Repairs. Job sites are not static, right? They're incredibly dynamic. Work changes constantly, and the scaffold often has to be safely altered or repaired to keep up. But modifying a scaffold requires a very strict workflow. You can't just grab a spanner and start moving bars. First, you review the scheduled changes so you know they're approved. Then, you carefully carry out the alterations. And finally, and this is absolutely crucial, any change triggers an immediate, full reinspection. You have to reset that safety clock before anyone steps foot back on that platform. And who gets to make these changes? Always consult a competent person for adjustments. Whether you're checking for weather corrosion or making a scheduled modification to the bays, you cannot fly blind. You must work in strict accordance with your Safe Work Method Statement, your SWMS, and the manufacturer specs. Only trained, competent personnel should be calling the shots on these physical adjustments. Which brings us to our final stop. Section 5, Mandatory Documentation and Handover. Okay, we've talked a lot about physical safety. Sole plates, tight wedges, all of that. But you need to understand that administrative safety is just as vital. If you don't do the paperwork, the physical work means nothing legally. There are two vital pieces of paperwork you're going to encounter. First, the scaffold inspection log. Think of this as the scaffold's ongoing health diary. It records the condition of everything every 30 days or after an alteration. On the flip side, you have the handover certificate. This is basically the passport for the scaffold. It's completed by a competent person before any other trades are allowed to use it, formally proving it's safe for initial use or safe after a big alteration. That handover certificate, it isn't just a piece of paper. It's a binding guarantee. It guarantees the scaffold was built to design and complies perfectly with Australian standards AS/NZS 1576.1/2010 and AS/NZS 4576/2020. Hitting those exact standards is what keeps you legally compliant and, much more importantly, ensures nobody gets hurt. So the crucial takeaway here is summarized perfectly by this golden rule from your coursework. Documentation is the only legal proof that a scaffold is safe for use. Let that really sink in for a second. It's the only legal proof. Honestly, I don't care if you used a laser level on every single ledger during the build. If it isn't documented in the log and signed off on that handover certificate, it isn't legally safe, and you literally cannot let anyone step on it. All right, as we wrap up this explainer for Genesis International College, I want to leave you with one final thought. The scaffold is up, but are you ready to take ownership of its ongoing safety? Remember, building it is just step one. True professional tradespeople differentiate themselves by how they monitor, alter, and document their sites. You've got the roadmap now to do exactly that. Take this knowledge, crush your practical assessments, and stay safe out there on the job. Once you master these under 4-meter setups, you'll be more than ready for the complex structures we'll cover next time. See you then.